I've been known historically to be a bit of a gamer, but I don't really have much time to play games anymore. A couple months back, I sold my giant gaming PC rig, and I started focusing on other things like this YouTube channel. Lately though, whenever I have a little bit of time and I really want to sit back and relax, I've wanted to play games again. So I purchased myself the Steam Deck OLED. My thing was that I really wanted to be able to play Steam games because honestly, there's a way bigger catalog of old games and new games, and I already had a pretty big Steam library. I didn't want to spend a few $1,000s on a gaming PC though, so the Steam Deck was the natural choice. I'd read a lot about it and it seemed like a really interesting combination of a gaming PC and a gaming console, and with the dock that Valve also sells, I could still plug it into a monitor or a TV. So yeah, I logged on to Steam from my computer and I sold off a ton of my old Counter-Strike skins and purchased the top of the line Steam Deck OLED, and I've been using it for a little while now, and I have a lot to say about it. My big curiosity going into getting a Steam Deck was how immersive was it going to be to play some of those bigger AAA titles? Because I've had a Switch OLED for a couple years, and in the original Switch before that, and while I enjoyed playing games on it, I generally stuck to a TV or a monitor to play most of my games because it just was never really that engaging when it was handheld, outside of simple games that were really handheld friendly like Pokemon. But when I was plugged into a TV or a monitor, the games besides Zelda, I will say, were always just too underpowered to be that engaging or immersive. And I am happy to say that the Steam Deck has been a really immersive way to play games on the go. I think it's a combination of multiple things. Originally, I thought that the Switch display was just too small to really engage with, but the Steam Deck isn't massive. It is a little bit bigger than the Switch, and I'm starting to think that it might be a combination of the screen being a little bit bigger, better speakers, as well as good controls and good ergonomics. The display on the Steam Deck is fantastic. I have the 1TB model, so I have the anti-glare display, but it doesn't take away from the OLED quality in my experience. The blacks are black, the contrast is amazing, and the display is clear enough to really easily see everything going on with detail, as well as make out all the UI elements. Everything is just oozing with vibrance. The display also pushes 1000 nits, so when you have a game that takes advantage of HDR content, it just looks incredible. Everything is just bright and poppy, and the OLED contrast lets you see everything so clearly. Honestly, better than any of the gaming monitors I had been using. I hadn't made the jump to OLED when I sold my PC because it was just prohibitively expensive, but having an OLED display built into a actual gaming PC that you can just lounge on the couch and play is just incredible. The Steam Deck OLED is also 90 Hertz, the display is. The previous model, the LCD one, was 60 Hertz, and I never really put much time into that, but I can say that I'm really happy with the 90 Hertz because it gives you just a little bit of extra smoothness when you're playing games that do push 90 Hertz. A lot of your big titles, generally you're not gonna get that kind of frame rate, but with most indie titles, I'm easily hitting 90 Hertz. A lot of my emulation, if the emulators can kind of support that frame rate. And on top of that, even with bigger games, if you really just drop the settings, you can start to push 70s, 80s in the frames. So the refresh rate, I think, was the perfect choice. It would not make any sense to put a 120 Hertz display on a Steam Deck because you're just never gonna get that many frames. OLED displays are a lot more power efficient than things like LCDs, and the panels themselves are a lot thinner, which means Valve was able to throw a slightly bigger battery into the Steam Deck's chassis. And on top of that, they switched to a chip that is a lot more power efficient. It's the same power coming out of the Steam Deck, but it's a little more power efficient, giving this model better battery than the previous. And I'm happy to say that the new Steam Deck goes 2 to 4 hours for me. And that does depend on the game. This is a gaming PC, so you can monitor things like your FPS or what components of the machine are using what kind of power, what the thermals are looking like. If you run a really intensive game like Red Dead Redemption 2, your battery is not going to be as good as if you run something like Enter the Gungeon. And that customization is really key to the Steam Deck feeling like a lot more than just another Switch or another gaming console. You have the ability to look under the hood and see all of these graphs and systems that show you exactly what is going on in your gaming machine. And having a handheld that feels like it wants to give me all the information and let me control the situation and the outcome feels really, really good. The controls on the Steam Deck are a big part of why I think playing on it is so comfortable. First of all, the ergonomics are great. It sits in your hand very comfortably. They put the bumps in the right spots. The triggers feel good, premium. The bumpers feel like bumpers. They have a nice click to them. The analog sticks are full size and they feel like an Xbox controller. Plenty premium. It feels amazing for a mobile system, especially coming from something that feels as cheap as a Nintendo Switch. The face buttons are pretty much identical in feel and layout to an Xbox controller. Same with the D-pad. They pretty much went the Xbox controller route, besides the two trackpads, which come akin to kind of like the Steam controller. You get a little bit of haptic feedback so you can feel your finger moving around the touchpad, and it operates really, really well. It's something that's really hard to demonstrate on video, but you feel the control of the mouse. You feel how hard you're pushing it or how fast you want it to go. It allows you to use a mouse cursor in situations or games where you might want to just use a mouse to navigate the UI, or you can map it to anything else. And considering the mappable trackpads, you also have mappable buttons on the back that are more akin to something like a Xbox Elite controller or a SCUF controller. Some of the higher end gaming controllers that let you put stuff like jump or melee on the back of your controller, or any other mapped macros that you might need. And going to the trackpads really quick, I do just want to say that having the ability to have a mouse control in a game or UI whenever I need it is an incredible thing for mobile gaming, because sometimes user interfaces and menus are just better with a mouse than a console. It's easier to just go click something, grab something, drag something. It's just a little bit nicer. I prefer it. You also have a touch screen if you need to interact with the UI. There's countless ways to interact with your games through the Steam Deck, and they all feel very premium and very comfortable. And while all of the controls operate pretty normally for any game you would expect, you also can pop up a Steam menu and completely 100% edit your controls to any profile you would want them to be. There are user profiles that you can download that people have made for certain games, and you can really do some crazy stuff, because you can make any button emulate a mouse or a keyboard button. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. There's a gyrometer in the Steam Deck that you can also integrate into controls. The customizability is incredibly deep. All these things go into making the Steam Deck just a really convenient but premium product to use. The ability to sit down on the couch and have what I would say is a premium AAA gaming experience is awesome. And I know a lot of people sit down on the couch to do that with consoles, but I don't have to only sit on the couch. I can do this on the toilet. I can do this on the subway. I recently was able to play Final Fantasy VII Remake on an airplane, which was a great way to pass the time because, again, of how immersive the Steam Deck actually is, which I don't feel is common for handhelds. Being able to sit down on a long 6-7 hour flight and just grind through some big RPGs but feel fully immersed in them passes the time wonderfully quickly. And I know I said the battery was around 2 to 4 hours depending on the game you play earlier. It's not hard to plug in the Steam Deck whenever you are sitting if you tend to play longer than that. I generally find that the battery life of the Steam Deck is just a little bit longer than what I would normally play in one sitting on a Steam Deck at this current time, because I'm generally pretty busy. Historically, I could see myself sitting down and playing much longer sessions, especially if I was doing some big multiplayer games, but if I'm playing a couple big RPGs or single player stuff, I'll sit down a couple hours, play, and then move on to something else. But if I am on a plane and want to do something else, or sitting it somewhere else, I don't know, I can just plug the Steam Deck into the wall, into a wall adapter. If you're sitting somewhere for hours, generally there's a USB port to plug in. Just plug in the Steam Deck into the USB-C port, and now you have infinite battery life. Steam is the star of the show on the Steam Deck, obviously, and it is run on a Linux-based Steam OS. It is wonderfully smooth, responsive. The audio design is incredible. It feels like a premium console experience, which I feel like for the deck is a fantastic thing, because you want it to be as simple as start up, press play, and you're gaming. In the UI itself, though, you can do all the Steam stuff. You can message friends, go to your library, store, you can go to your profile, you can even go to the community marketplace. Being that this is Steam, though, it is more than just a game player or a marketplace, because you have the community market, which means that you can grab mods. I'm able to play an endless amount of different zombies maps in Black Ops 3 because I can go straight to the community market and download modded maps, or I can go get community assets for other games. You have the ability to do so much more even with just Steam OS than any other console would ever offer. Along with game mode, which is what they call Steam OS, you can just switch the operating system over to desktop mode, which is just running Linux, which means you just have a fully operational PC if you need to do any web browsing or anything. And yes, you can install Windows on your Steam Deck if you want. I don't really want to because I prefer Steam OS and Linux does everything I need. That does limit you on games you can play a little bit, it because a lot of anti-cheats for multiplayer games, for instance, will only run on Windows. I've tried some multiplayer gaming on the Steam Deck. Co-op stuff is great, but I would never do any competitive multiplayer on here. But since this is Steam, you can also add non-Steam games to your library. So you can download other game launchers or other systems to throw stuff onto Steam OS to access, which leads me to emulation, because I've done a ton of emulation on this thing. There's great community tools like EmuDeck, which does a mass install of all kinds of emulators, allowing you to play endless games from all kinds of different consoles. I personally haven't really pushed the extent of what that can do, but I've got a ton of GameCube games and a ton of Nintendo DS games, and even modded DS games like Pokemon ROM hacks installed on my Steam Deck, and I can just boot those through Steam OS. On top of that, because I have the dock, I can plug my Steam Deck directly into my TV and emulate games onto my TV. I recently ran over to Amazon and grabbed a little USB 4 GameCube controller adapter and bought 4 GameCube controllers. So now I can just emulate a GameCube on my TV. Me and my friends can play Mario Party 6, 7. We play Mario Kart Double Dash, played Legends of Zelda The Four Swords. We can play anything on the GameCube with a GameCube controller on my TV because my little handheld gaming PC. There is just so much stuff you can do on the Steam Deck. It is just such a cool gadget for somebody who just likes tech and or gaming. You just have endless possibilities with this thing. Playing games from the Steam library though is the easiest thing to do on the deck. You just go to your library, press install, and then press play. Pretty simple. Games are split into 4 categories by Steam, and you can always go over to the game info and see exactly what Steam has to say about this game running on the Steam Deck. But the first is fully playable. You start the game and it is literally a console experience. You press play and you go directly into the game. All the resolution is handled, controls mapped, everything. 2 is playable, which is like a yellow exclamation point indication. Check the game notes. Generally, it just means when you boot the game, it has to boot through an external launcher. Like for instance, if you want to boot a Ubisoft game, I've been playing Ghost Recon Wildlands on my Steam Deck recently, and when I press play, it starts the game, but then it has to open the Ubisoft launcher and start the game through the Ubisoft launcher as well. And when you do that for the first time, you have to pull up a keyboard or something to just log into your Ubisoft account, which will make the game labeled as playable, but not fully supported because it's not the console experience. The Steam Deck has a button command that pulls up a virtual keyboard and mouse, allowing you to handle all that stuff. So I would say most playable games mean go ahead and play it. It's perfectly fine. The other types of categories for games are 1, not tested. Valve just hasn't tested the game and they don't know. So either Google it or install it and just give it a go. And the 4th is unsupported. And the weird thing about unsupported is Valve will put the unsupported label on something if the game has a component that is unplayable, but it is just if one component is unplayable. Like for instance, Ghost of Tsushima came out on Steam recently and I played the entire game on my Steam Deck, but it is labeled as unsupported for Steam Deck because there was a DLC mode release that was just included in the actual PC release that is multiplayer and requires PSN support, which just isn't supported on Linux and Steam. And Valve decided to label that the entire game was unsupported. While you can still play the entire single player and the entire open world on your deck, it was even made by the developer to be supportable on handheld PCs. So generally, if something says playable, unsupported, just Google it. How does it work on the Steam Deck? Reddit will let you know exactly what to do if it's playable or unsupported, if you can get it running, because there's plenty of games that say unsupported apparently that you can get to run. You just have to do a little bit of finagling. Now, most of the time I play on the handheld console because it's just really easy. But like I said earlier, I did get the dock. Sometimes I want to play a game on the TV so my girlfriend can engage with it, like Oxenfree, or another time, we want to play Mario Kart or something. And sometimes I just want to sit back at my desk and plug into my Apple Studio display and play a game. The caveat of putting games from your Steam Deck on bigger displays is it is a gaming PC, so you have to change resolution scale yourself, that kind of thing. And the Steam Deck is like 800p, which looks really good on that size of a display. But when you put an 800p image onto a 4K TV, all of a sudden it might not look as crisp. Although I've been kind of surprised how good some things still look in 800p on a giant TV. Maybe it's because I have an OLED and OLEDs just always look good, but you can still run a 720p game on a big TV and it'll look okay. Some games not as much, but some games you can scale up to 4K and the Steam Deck will still run it. Mainly indie games, easier to run games, but if you're okay with 720, 1080p and it doesn't really impact your entire experience, you can easily throw it up on a big TV. A lot of the emulated games like I was talking about, you do not need to worry about. Like for instance, Mario Kart Double Dash, I can upscale it to 16:9 in 4K and still get over 60 frames and it feels great, and that's pretty awesome. Whenever I play games at my desk, I can just plug into my Apple Studio display, which takes a little bit of finagling. Seems that people have been trying to figure out how to do it. I figured out how to do it, and I will make sure to share that in this video, and I'll probably put a short up as well on how to do that. SteamOS and Apple's displays have a little bit of unfriendliness going on for some reason. You can plug in a USB-C or Thunderbolt Steam Deck into the display, and you'll get audio, but you won't get video, or you'll get a little bit of flicker. To fix this, all you gotta do is switch over to desktop mode and set your Linux default resolution to 2160p. You can't do this in SteamOS settings, which is weird. You should be able to change your default resolution scale, but the SteamOS resolution scaling and Apple's display just aren't very compatible. So go over to Linux, change it over to 2160, and then your desktop will show up on your monitor. You can still play games on it, just boot the game through the Steam app in the Linux OS, which is what I've been doing. A lot of people have been asking for game mode, which yeah, would be great, but honestly, it's not hard to boot games through regular Steam on the Linux thing, and it is the same experience. So just boot your game through the Steam app instead of the Steam game mode, and you're great to play on a display like the Apple Studio display. The only other downside is you can't open up like the Steam Deck contextual menu when in desktop mode, but any settings you set in that mode will apply to the desktop mode. So if you set a frame counter to put up in the corner on your SteamOS, it will be there on the Studio display. And it is the same for custom button mapping. You'll need to do it on SteamOS in the handheld, but all of that mapping will carry over when you boot it through a desktop. And the same resolution stuff applies from TV, monitor, anything to the Studio display. If you're trying to run a game in 4K or 5K, if the game supports it for some reason, you're gonna get some impacts on your frame rates. But there's plenty of games that I've been surprised that I can still pull 60 to 90 frames in 4K. I'm not trying to run massive AAA games at high frame rates on my display, but indie games and smaller stuff like emulation can still run incredibly well. And being that it even supports the speakers in the Studio display, which are wonderful, it is a pretty awesome gaming experience, I will say. Apple needs to get some gaming going because the Studio display is a pretty dope gaming monitor. And one more thing I do want to point out is, as it is a gaming PC, you can open it up and mod it if you want. Put another chassis on it, put a new SSD in it, and format the drive to whatever you want. You don't have to, but you can. As far as storage expansion goes without opening it up and doing all kinds of crazy stuff, there is a micro SD card that you can throw in there and store games on, do all kinds of stuff on, which I highly recommend. I have plenty of games on there. Makes the loading screens a little bit slower if you boot them off the SD, but it's really not that bad. And like I said before, emulation. Throw an SD card in there, download EmuDeck off of Linux, find a YouTube video that teaches you how to do it, and install all of your old favorite games from your childhood, because it's amazing to be able to go and play, you know, Lord of the Rings Return of the King from the GameCube, or go play Wind Waker, right? It's just an incredible experience. I've been playing a ton of Pokemon ROM hacks also. I just highly recommend emulating. And the Steam Deck is just so good at it. It's so cool. The Steam Deck is awesome. I'm honestly in love with the thing. It's just the perfect device for me to keep enjoying games and keep my office space pretty focused on productivity and work while still having an amazing gaming device. And from the SteamOS games to the emulation games, I can play pretty much whatever I want on the go, wherever I am, with a premium experience and all the customization that comes along with a gaming PC, and at a pretty affordable price, especially when it comes to gaming PCs. And with the ability to game on a TV, my displays, and just the gorgeous handheld display, I can't recommend it enough if it is for you. And if you are interested in it, it probably is for you. The Steam Deck is not for everybody. There are some people that really require a 4K, 120 hertz console experience, or just the top of the line gaming PC experience. But if you just enjoy having fun playing games and don't need it to be just insanely powerful, this does everything amazing, and it does it to the quality that you want it to be to have a comfortable experience. If you are a busy gamer and just want a little machine to play the games, play your backlog, play some stuff you missed that you played when you were a kid, I just can't recommend it enough. Now, I've been having a blast making videos lately, and I love engaging with you guys. So make sure to drop a comment on your opinion of the Steam Deck, what you think it could be in the future, and what you like about it now, and let's chat about it. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd rather hang out on Twitter or other social medias, I have them in the description, and I will see you guys later.